person you see here is a terrorist. However, this is a kind of terror that you might not be familiar with. This man is stealing lion cubs who are in the care of professionals who have devoted most of their lives to the care and feeding and perpetuation of their species. This man is a different kind of terrorist. He is an animal rights extremist. In the past few years, as many as 19 lion cubs have been stolen from very healthy and caring environments. These animals, ripped from their loving owners and caretakers, have been released into rural areas of America in order to create incidents to support their cause. What is their cause? These individuals seek to strip your rights to own any type of animal. They are dangerous fanatics who not only stage releases, which are in effect an act of terror, they also use the law and the courts to wage war against responsible owners and breeders whose vital work preserves many endangered species. Released in an area which is not their native habitat, the prospects for these cubs would seem grim. However, they play an integral role in the extremist plans, and their lives will serve the agenda of terror which we have come to know as animal rights extremism. On November 26, 2006, President Bush signed into law the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. It defines these people as terrorists.
The Animal Enterprise Terrorist Act is a bunch of bullshit. It's going to drive people towards animal rights rather than away, because it's so obviously focused on the money. Everything in politics these days is about the money, money, money. And if you have money, you're worse than Washington. If you don't have money, you're not worth anything. And we can use that to motivate people.
So you want to be able to blame it on a bad keeper. Either someone who has it nearby, but again, you have to steal them right from there and do it in a way that looks like their cage failed rather than cut it with bolt cutters. Or just that somebody abandoned them. Well, I would be doing the release stuff in the field. We have a whole team of people. And somebody else would call a newspaper and report a sighting of this thing, and then somebody else would call it, and some other folks would fly from California, do interviews, bring it to public attention, prime the pump, get the newspapers interested. The challenge is to get the whole thing started, because the news media attention is so short-lived and so quick. But if you can get something important enough to grab their attention, somebody will do an in-depth on it. It'll make the weekly papers, it'll make the monthly news.
And then you know you have an issue you can really push with.
News cameras love it. You get all over the evening news.
Because cubs will stay put. And you always put them in pairs because they'll play with each other. If you let one cub loose by itself, it'll wander off looking for its mate or its mother.
There's no reason to release them ever except for publicity and shock value. That's because of how well we manage to control the media. We have a whole team of people calling on the radio talk shows, writing letters to the editor, doing all sort of stuff to make people not think about how obvious a fraud it is. You want to cascade this up from one little shocking incident to a serious discussion of legislation, and the politicians say, something should be done.
More than 1,000 terrorist acts annually are the work of animal rights promoters. These range from the bombing of meat companies, to the arson of research facilities, to the break-ins and thefts of hundreds of animals, to sending letters rigged with razor blades to scientists engaged in primate research. They are breaking into zoos and private facilities and stealing the animals. In response to this, Congress has created the Animal Enterprise Terrorist Act. This act of Congress attempts to prevent and control the hate crimes that are being committed by animal rights memberships and their promoters. It is in the interest of animal rights activism to ban the keeping of all animals in captivity, and ultimately, the practice of meat eating by human beings. Whether these are cattle to be taken for food, or exotic animals to be kept in captivity, or tropical fish, or snakes, or ordinary house cats, or even seeing eye dogs, animal rights promoters wish to separate the human being from nature as a matter of moral responsibility. I decided to travel to the Conservators Center Incorporated in Mebane, North Carolina, which houses approximately 30 rescued lions, tigers, and leopards, as well as dozens of other endangered species. Doug Evans and Mindy Stinner have devoted almost 30 years of their lives, respectively, to this vital conservation work. Facilities like this one are the frequent targets of animal rights extremists who regard the breeding and perpetuation of endangered wildlife a violation of their quasi-religious beliefs. We entered the second of 2 lock gates whose tall perimeter fences keep unwanted visitors from approaching the main enclosures where the big cats and other endangered species are maintained. CCI is not open to the public, and yet abides by stringent safety precautions to protect those unlawful persons that might trespass. Each one of these rescued animals has a story.
Damn, is that okay? Hi, come on. Yeah. You can tell she's incredibly vicious. Yes, you're a terrible, evil tiger.
If you don't speak the language, you could be in very serious trouble very quickly.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah. We'd have you tell the whole story, but you know, your vocabulary is limited.
We now know. Made an impulse purchase of a baby tiger.
This place in Indiana that was having a hard time feeding their tigers, and they were bound for the canned hunts, and so he bought the litter and found good homes for all 3 of them.
We know that Peggy had bought the cat herself. She thought that she was rescuing the cat because the person who had the kittens told her that they were going to be going to live in a not great situation. And her husband said, well, let's get a tiger. And she said, you must be mad. And he said, no, really, come meet the cub and you'll fall in love and we'll get a tiger.
About 10 minutes later, he comes out, he goes, hey, Peg, you want to get a Siberian tiger cub? And I said, what? Don't tell me they're selling tigers in the paper here. They can't be. And he's going, it says it right here. I said, well, they can't really be selling tigers in the paper.
She purchased Tia, brought her to her vet, who said, well, okay. Gave Tia her first set of shots, that same drugs you would use for a domestic cat, although they are not approved for use in tigers and lions. They are effective. The research just hasn't been done yet. She also had Tia declawed, which is something we are very, very much against. It is an amputation and a mutilation. And does not make a tiger any safer.
They built a cage for her that they thought was safe. They hired in people who had built cages for the North Carolina Zoo and for other AZA zoos, and who said that what they were building would be adequate to contain her, and she took their word as experts. One Monday, Peggy fed her, and she got very aggressive. And the setup of the cage did not include a shift cage that was outside where she could maneuver the animal into the space and close the door without having to go into the space with her.
They roofed an 8-foot cage with welded wire fencing that was 1 step above chicken wire. The problem was ignorance. These animals take a lot of care, and Peggy did not have the experience or the knowledge base to care for her properly. So she didn't know how to construct a cage properly, and the guys at the zoo, I feel like, well, it's not the zoo guys, the people who she contracted to build the fence did not do right by her. I don't know how, I'm sure I'll find better words to say, no, gee, it's not a great idea to go in a cage with a tiger, with food. This is a shift cage. This cage will contain the 2 animals that live in the primary enclosure. We leave that drop door open so that they also can use this space if they'd like to. And we have a feed slot on it. Before you go in, you ask the tigers nicely to come into their shift cage. They know the routine and they do it willingly. You drop that door. They are contained here, and then you enter their primary enclosure and do whatever you wish to do. When the animal's a cub, it's very cute and cuddly. Then it remains cute and cuddly if you socialize the animal properly. But now, after 3 to 6 months, it's capable of inflicting serious injury or even death. So people don't understand this, and they don't bother to put a shift or a safety on. I mean, if these two items were not here, your only option is to go in with the animals.
She was like my kitten. She was my baby. And one day I went out to feed her before I was going to work, and she had totally changed. I mean, from the day before, Tia had totally changed. Her eyes were glazed over. She was dripping from the mouth. She was going, "Wah!" You know, and I said, "Come on, what happened? What's wrong?"
All of a sudden, Tia becomes very, very aggressive. Could be any number of reasons. Could very well be the fact that she's never seen another tiger. It could be the fact that she was not spayed. She is intact and has never had a male in her life. Typically, we vasectomize our males because we do not want to create more large cats, but we vasectomize the males because it's a simpler and less invasive procedure with very little recovery time, whereas a spay is similar to a hysterectomy in a human.
And she destroyed that lockdown cage, and Peggy did not have a safe way to deliver food to Tia or water to Tia. And she called animal control, who said, yes, it's a problem. She called local vets, who said, wow, that's a really big problem. She called several other sanctuaries and other reputable facilities who said, we don't have any space, we don't have staff to send you, we don't have, money to build you a cage, but we can provide some guidance for you if you have money to make the changes to your cage. I know. And the last 2 places she spoke to told her that she should go ahead and euthanize the cat because there wasn't anywhere for her to go, and it was in everybody's best interest.
I called Carnivore Preservation Trust, and Pam, the executive director of there.
My name is Pam Falk. I'm the executive director of Carnivore Preservation Trust, which is also known as CPT.
She goes, well, I'm real familiar with your case, and the only thing I can suggest is that you have Tia euthanized. And I said, what? I can't even believe you're saying that. This is Carnivore Preservation Trust, and you're telling me to have my cat killed for no reason?
Pam from CPT was one of the people that Peggy spoke with, and Peggy told us that Pam had specifically told her it would be in everybody's best interest if she go ahead and euthanize Tia.
To euthanize this animal, that is an absolutely unnecessary thing to do if she can be housed safely and securely. The animal rights people get their way. Tia would have been euthanized. They are not interested, truthfully, I believe, in animal rights. The people who are running these organizations make an enormous amount of money, and I think they are motivated financially.
It's in the animal's best interest to stay in touch with the loving owner. And Peggy comes to visit Tia whenever she can. At first she was coming about every other weekend and staying up at our house, and then she moved down to, every couple of months she'd come up and spend a weekend and spend some time with her.
You've seen Tia. She's 10 years old. I have worked with tigers that were 24. There is no reason to euthanize an animal that can be saved. This does not mean every tiger or lion or rabbit can be saved. However, the bill that the Animal Protection Institute puts out is designed to stop us from doing any rescue work whatsoever. Simply put, the animal rights organizations like PETA, Animal Protection Institute, I should spell it out, Animal Protection Institute, API, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They are not animal welfare groups. There's a very big difference between animal welfare and animal rights. Animal rights people do not want anyone to use animals for any purpose whatsoever. In fact, Ingrid Newkirk, the president of PETA, has stated unequivocally that seeing eye dogs should be banned. Animals that help handicapped people live a better life, this is cruel and inhumane, and we should not exploit them in any way that way. These people don't want you to even have a goldfish or a dog or a cat. They want us all to be vegans, and which, don't even wear leather or don't eat meat. I have no problem if that's the way you would like to live. This is America.
And make no mistake, the ultimate goal of these organizations is to ban all human use of animals. They want to ban hunting. They want to ban farming. They want to ban fishing. They want to ban circuses, medical research, and they don't want you to eat meat. As a matter of fact, they don't want your pets to eat meat either.
You're watching NBC 17 News at 11.
Who should be able to own a tiger, a bear, or perhaps a poisonous snake? It's a question the state wants to clarify, opening the door to heated opinions. NBC 17's Brian DeRoy shows us the emotional exotic animal debate.
It was supposed to be a meeting about regulating wild animals.
We will keep these animals and we will fight you in court every step of the way.
But it quickly turned into something a little more like a zoo.
Why is the taxpayer paying for Lorraine Smith to have vegan lunch in Sacramento, California?
A state committee is trying to recommend to the General Assembly banning people or even private zoos from owning animals the state considers dangerous. Tigers, lions, certain poisonous snakes, even a giraffe is on the list. Dean Repa's fangs came out at the meeting.
Of the facts as we know them.
He owns a Cape Fear Serpentarium in Wilmington. He's outraged the state wants to tell who can and cannot own certain snakes. He's even more steamed knowing an animal rights activist from California is on a North Carolina state committee.
This is just a step as they go along. They want to ban hunting, fishing, meat eating.
Perhaps even more dangerous than acts of terror is when the animal rights extremists get a foothold in state and local government. Then the government itself can be charged to perform the task of confiscation and euthanasia. On December 18, 2006, I accompanied a group of wildlife professionals to the state capitol complex in Raleigh to film a committee meeting advising the state legislature on Senate Bill 1032. Which would seek to ban the owning of nearly 1,000 species of exotic wildlife in North Carolina. This bill, authored by the Animal Protection Institute, a Sacramento, California-based animal rights advocacy group, has already passed in 5 other states.
But we do also need to address the fact that this bill was in fact written and introduced to our legislature by a radical animal rights organization from outside our state.
We have extremes in all areas out there. I think that the true animal rights person does have, and I appreciate their comments or concerns, but I don't think that's mainstream America.
Our own North Carolina Welfare Act has a provision to include USDA regulation of other animals. We don't need an API-sponsored bill to help.
The APA wrote this bill, and it is identical to the bill that appeared in Kentucky.
In many other states.
It was simply handed over to this committee from people in Sacramento, California, and we can prove this every step of the way, in any way you can imagine. In fact, we have proved it.
I don't know. I guess I would just say some sort of exemption for people that's done it right for, say, 50 years.
As independent wildlife professionals, we support rational legislation, inspection and licensing, but we cannot support a blanket ban on private ownership of wildlife with just a few favored organizations accepted.
In addition to violating federal law, this would put many exotic animals in inappropriate situations that can lead to a danger to the public. I urge you to carefully consider the repercussions of any proposal that you may put forth.
We are a right-to-work state. And by that, by law, we cannot be forced to join an organization or a union to run our businesses, such as AZA.
It kills me to think that somebody could take away my rights.
I would like to see some statistics shown of public safety in this state in a scientific and rational manner that is a balanced and fair view of the facts as we know them. Not is something that some animal rights activists have made up because they have a pet peeve. And we will fight you in court every step of the way, and I myself will spend millions of dollars to make sure it doesn't happen. So you'd better think this over before we go that far, because you might want to move your bill to another state, Mr. API, because you will lose money here.
I would like to know what the basis of this legislation is. If it's not based on real statistics, okay? And it can't be, because the statistics are against it. If it's not based on science, what is the basis of your desire to put together this bill?
Yes.
Just anybody. I don't know who to address. Maybe.
There was a bill that was introduced through Senator Garwood.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, but why?
This is the same bill.
If I can answer, please.
Yeah, okay,
Please give me the courtesy.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean that.
We were called because Senator Garwood's clerk who's assisting was trying to get response from related agencies, and there were items on this bill that were a concern to us because we looked at it. We were brought in, you know, after it had already been drafted.
If there is no statistical or scientific evidence of a genuine public threat, what is your actual agenda? Why the bill?
Well, we don't have it. There's no agenda that we set. The point is that this...
Well, okay, let me rephrase one more time. Senator Garwood put forth this bill stating that there were these inherently dangerous animals, that there are public safety issues, right? And perhaps animal welfare issues. Statistically, according to our own state study, that's not true. So, what is the actual agenda? What are we shooting for if there is no support for the assertions being made by the bill? That's what I'm asking.
The likelihood is, as other states begin to make legislation, is we're going to see an influx of folks who will be bringing animals in, who are exactly the sorts of folks that none of us in this room really want to see keep such animals.
What is you're actually seeking? It's not to prevent anybody from moving here. Why would that be?
Well, I think the wording, if you look at the limited number of species that are actually being considered, so I'm going to cut this off.
There are no escaped big cats terrorizing this country. What gives you this idea? And where is your statistics to show it? You have no facts. You sit there inventing this, and you keep thinking that if you repeat it again and again and again, it will sink into us and that we will believe it. That is not facts. That is rhetoric.
You asked, what are the small zoos doing to prevent or enhance safety? I have a whole folder out there of AZA blunders in the last 6 years that I wish I had brought in here. It is absolutely pigeonholing to say that they're the problem when the AZA zoos are doing terrible.
So what is the AZA anyway? Well, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums was founded in 1924. According to their own website, the AZA is a non-profit organization dedicated to the advancement of accredited zoos and aquariums in the areas of animal care, wildlife conservation, education, and science. They also claim that AZA-accredited zoos and aquariums undergo a thorough review that includes a detailed accreditation application as well as a multiple-day on-site inspection by a team of experts from around the country. Sounds great, doesn't it? So one would consider that the AZA would have high standards of safety and, of course, be experts in animal keeping. So we decided to investigate the North Carolina Zoo in Asheboro, an AZA facility, to see if these high standards are in practice. What we found was surprising. Here at the cougar enclosure, we can see that our investigators could easily reach over this fence and insert their hands into the cage, where this wild cougar could have approached and attacked, inflicting serious injury. As you can see here, a smaller person, or perhaps a child, could easily insert their whole hand. We went back and asked Doug Evans at CCI what would happen if a large cat grabbed your finger or hand through an opening in a wire or chain link fence.
Yeah, if you stick your fingers inside through the chain link into a wild animal's cage, something like a tiger, a lion, a cougar, a leopard, a jaguar, any of these animals, basically they do the same thing as when you play with a dog. They'll grab the toy and then they get a better grip. But with these larger animals, they're much more powerful, and when they pull, your hand will disintegrate as it goes through the 2-inch diamond, or 2 7/8 inch diamond. And when it reaches your shoulder and they pull, your arm detaches.
Here we are at Ashboro Zoo in front of the cougar exhibit, and as you've just seen, we have no trouble putting our hands into the cougar cage. An adult human being could put 4 fingers into the cage with a cougar. A child could certainly put his whole hand into the cage with an adult cougar. And as you've just learned, this could easily lead to dismemberment or death, because a cougar has no trouble grabbing your fingers and pulling your whole arm in through a 2-inch hole and taking it off at the shoulder.
Here in the bobcat pen, we also were able to approach the main enclosure and insert fingers into the area where this powerful cat lives. Although smaller, it could still inflict serious damage to a person's extremities. Again, the danger to children should be obvious. We interviewed Cameron Jones, a Burlington Middle School student, who was on a field trip with his class at the zoo the day we were filming. We had never met him before this moment, and he volunteered his opinions to us about the zoo.
I see the fences are too low some places, and I see that it's some places that animals can come up.
Did you notice any places where you could have gotten into them?
Many places.
This is a very dangerous Indian mugger crocodile that readily preys upon humans. Ourselves or this couple could easily step over this railing and get in the enclosure with this large reptile, which is also labeled inherently dangerous. Probably worst of all, I was able to walk off the paved trail with my camera right up to the fence of the enclosure where these big warthogs live. These are considered very dangerous animals and are on the committee's inherently dangerous list. And also here our team member approached this fence and went nose to nose with these potentially deadly wild pigs. She could have easily reached through this chain link fence and touched them, but she didn't want to take the risk. So who is responsible? Well, maybe Lorraine Smith, curator of mammals. But Lorraine is out on animal rights crusades and doesn't have time for zoo improvement. So maybe it's David Jones, the zoo director, who oversees Lorraine Smith. But David Jones is off on Lorraine's mission to ban the keeping of the very animals they call inherently dangerous. So who's in charge?
Every zoo is next to a road, just to put everybody into a roadside zoo, it's just not fair. Private zoos, our zoo is probably the oldest zoo in the entire state. I don't think anybody would question that.
We get a lot of visitors in the zoo now that are in their 40s and 50s that came to the zoo when they were kids on school buses.
We have family groups come every summer, and they bring the great grandkids and they tell us we've been coming since 1952 and it's family tradition and stuff like that. We have a lot of school groups, and we get a lot of the handicapped, autistic children, and a lot of the nursing homes. They love to come out and have picnics and spend the whole day at the zoo.
Every enclosure at Tregembo Zoo is surrounded by a 4-foot high fence, which surrounds the main cages with a 12 to 15-foot perimeter, preventing patrons direct access to the main cage. This is a layered system, which is in effect 2 cages in one barrier for the people and 2 for the animals. This is a more elevated standard than what we encountered at the NC Zoo.
Made the zoo safe so to protect us
And also to protect the visitors and protect the animals from the visitors.
The requirement for the USDA is the same as the AZA requirement. It's not.
No, the AZA is a club. It started out, we actually will remember over like 2 or 3 years time, they started getting all these big regulations and they got the big name zoos involved, and pretty soon they just wanted to get it so expensive that the small zoos couldn't even afford to be in the club anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Now you have to fly out 2 people from other zoos to come check your facility every year. You have to pay for all their expenses, and the dues are pretty high to be a member of AZA.
To make an effort to get into the grizzly bear, and then I have, it seems to me, about 15 feet before I can even get near the grizzly bear's cage. So this is a little bit different than Ashboro Zoo, where I can actually put my fingers in the cages. This is one of the animals on the inherently dangerous list, and I guess he could fall on me, but in order to do that, I would once again have to scale this tall fence just to get anywhere near Mr. Giraffe. Oh, and there he goes. So evidently I'm more dangerous than he is. He ran away. So this would be a 3-part cage?
Basically, yeah, because there's 2 doors on that section where you can pin them off, and then when you have to go in, you have them pinned away from you, and we go in or through there to do anything we have to do.
So it's a very safe arrangement. You haven't,
safe arrangement for us to keep them safe.
Yeah, and well, do you consider keeping animals like this a very safe thing if you have arrangements like this type of a caging? I mean, is it something almost anybody could do?
Yeah, if they built a proper pen, anybody should be able to do it.
Yeah.
And the proper fence. I mean, the requirement from USDA is to have an 8-foot fence around the area where a big cat is. So we have one around the whole perimeter of our property.
Right.
And then a 4-foot barrier fence to keep people from getting up to the cage.
Right. Well, okay, say a tiger got out of this cage, he has to do what then? Climb another?
He'd have to climb out of an 8-foot fence, which is mostly metal on ours. In 50 years of our zoo here, no animal has gotten loose and hurt anyone.
Seeing that the safety standards of Tregembo exceed that of the AZA-sponsored state zoo, what does that say about the AZA accreditation? And what then would be the real motivation to close down any competing private facility?
Because not just the people, the tourism dollars lost, because the zoo's a big draw for a lot of people to come to the area.
And they would rather ban something than regulate it. You understand that?
Oh, yes.
Because the reason is, if they regulate it, they've got to do the work to keep up with it. If they ban it, it's gone.
Now the legal term would be a government-granted coercive monopoly. Think carefully about that term. If it affects interstate commerce, and it does, it could open us up to, in North Carolina, to antitrust suits. You are interfering with people's right to work. You would be interfering with, you'd be closing a number of businesses.
But if they succeeded in taking them away from you, what would they do to the animals?
They normally euthanize everything.
Euthanize?
It means kill.
Means kill.
That's right. Animal rights groups are the #1 euthanizer of domestic animals in the world. They regard any pets as results of selective breeding, which should be exterminated. Yes, I said exterminated. For example, in the early hours of June 15, 2005, 2 employees of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, Andrew Cook and Adria Hinkle, were arrested in Ahoxie, North Carolina, and charged with 31 felony counts of cruelty to animals. These are police photos from the crime scene. This is the death kit used to euthanize the animals. And this is the PETA-owned van that carried the cages which carried the pups and kittens to their deaths. And this is the Piggly Wiggly where the dumpster is, where Cook and Hinkle were arrested dumping the carcasses of the pups and kittens in black garbage bags. Witnesses from the Bertie County Animal Shelter in North Carolina and the Ahoxie Animal Hospital later confirmed that the two PETA employees had collected animals earlier that day, including puppies and kittens, on the promise that PETA would find them adoptive homes. Animal rights organizations have euthanized 80% of the animals surrendered to them in the last 10 years. Hinkle and Cook's trial commenced on January 22, 2007.
Our person is an organization like API related to PETA. I don't know what they do at headquarters, but it's all the same bunch of people. And you have to understand, there's all these overlapping organizations. They all have the same members. The big difference, I mean, PETA has been doing a lot of direct action, a lot of in-your-face confrontation, so forth, and it got a bit of a bad name for itself, and the name became got a bit of a stigma. API is trying for legislation. They're doing lobbying, they're doing politics, they're doing public impact.
This white tiger came from a zoo up in the mountains of North Carolina, Soco Zoo. They went out of business last November.
All right. Was it someone's pet tiger?
They bought it for the zoo itself, but it was their sort of a pet till it got too large, and then they couldn't pet it.
I don't want to hear about grandfather clauses. I read the grandfather clause in the original bill. It was merely a snow job.
The way they were saying up there was they were going to try to grandfather things in, but you couldn't replace anything. So if it was grandfathered in and it was an animal that lived, say, 10 years, at the end of 10 years, you'd have an empty pen. And this animal passed away in a few years, you'd have an empty pen. Pretty soon you'd have little rabbits and little guinea pigs in the little pens, and that's what you'd have a little kitty zoo, because you couldn't get any big animals, you know?
Right. The Inherently Dangerous Animal Bill, as promoted by PETA and API, is an attempt to destroy conservation programs worldwide. It is not about public safety. That is the mask these crackpots are using to win public confidence. It is about extermination. If these people win in America, 100 years of conservation efforts are all out the window. Millions of animals will die and whole species of wildlife will be exterminated. And that is their goal, extermination. Their goal is to break the chain of generations. Remove one link in the chain and the rest will follow. They have infiltrated the AZA through people like Lorraine Smith, and from there infiltrated some factions of the government. The animal rights movement is the single greatest threat to conservation in America.
So why did Joan Troy vote yes for a bill that contradicts facts and statistics about public safety, promoting a threat where none exists, that charges the state government with the animal rights agenda of enforced euthanasia and long-term extermination of endangered species in captivity, that is a state-enforced coercive monopoly that will put North Carolinians out of work, that will affect tourism to North Carolina, that has no fiscal plan for paying for the damages it causes and puts new burdens on taxpayers? Could it be that Joan Troy has had a meeting of the minds? And is this the mind she has met with? Animal rights extremist Nicole Paquette, fellow attorney and consultant from outside our state.
I did not come with facts and figures. I came with stories. The worst call we received that I want to be sure you hear is from someone in western North Carolina. It was a woman who is now divorced. She owned a tiger in her backyard. and she called to say that her tiger was beginning to behave very aggressively.
We now know made an impulse purchase of a baby tiger.
This tiger, who was 11 years old, had never seen a vet, never received any kind of inoculations.
She purchased Tia, brought her to her vet, who said, well, okay. Gave Tia her first set of shots, that same drugs you would use for a domestic cat.
Was in an enclosure that was primarily a large dog kennel and was beginning to tear it down around him.
They built a cage for her that they thought was safe. They hired in people who had built cages for the North Carolina Zoo.
Lorraine Smith, NC Zoo.
David Jones from the zoo.
All of a sudden, Tia becomes very, very aggressive. Could be any number of reasons.
She wanted us to come get him. We would not come get him because we couldn't handle him. And we did not have our quarantine facility, and we're not bringing an animal with an unknown health history into our environment where it could contaminate the other 100 animals that live with us.
And the last two places she spoke to told her that she should go ahead and euthanize the cat because there wasn't anywhere for her to go, and it was in everybody's best interest.
I called Carnivore Preservation Trust.
My name is Pam Falk. I'm the Executive Director of Carnivore Preservation Trust, which is also known as CPT.
And Peggy told us that Pam had specifically told her it would be in everybody's best interest if she'd go ahead and euthanize Tia.
We want to make clear that we do have a board of 11 people. We are a nonprofit. One of our board members is a curator with the North Carolina Zoo. I want to let you know that. And at the same time, I want to make crystal clear that that does not make us related to the zoo in any way.
You said something about a couple hundred cats and would they all be euthanized? And you said, no, that would never happen. I'd like to know what you're going to do with them, knowing the zoos can't hold them.
If you look at the limited number of species, if you look at the limited number of species, if you look at the limited number of species.
This bill will end the captive reproduction of over 1,000 species of exotic and endangered wildlife. David Jones would present a deceptive portrait. The ban does not mean the end of just one species, but whole orders and families of species. The survival of many of these depends upon captive breeding. How could the director of a state zoo be unaware of this fact? This supports the radical plan of animal rights advocates who believe that captive wild species are impure and genetically inferior because of their prolonged contact with humans. In the delusion of animal rights, this practice must cease, even at the cost of extinction. Hello? Yeah, I ran an ad about a snake. It's a python. He's too big. It's about 18 feet long. Well, I just ain't got room for him no more. You know, my wife and I work all the time. We got 3 kids. They're in school. We're just too busy. It's just too much work for us. We need somebody to come in and knows what they're doing. You know, give him a good home. We love him. I mean, we love the snake. I mean, we've had him since we were, you know, we had him for 10 years. Yeah. Well, if you think you can do something good with him, you can take him off my hands. I'll be here all afternoon if you want to come over and take a look. You need directions? All right then, well, here's how you get here.
Why use snakes? What's good about using snakes? Because they're easy to get, They attract a lot of phobia and a lot of attention, and they're slow and stay put for the camera and the news crews, the animal control and so forth. Or pythons work really well because, you know, they're big and they're slow, and if you feed them right, and people have real phobia with snakes, so they, you know, you find get some people you can call a paper, be all hysterical and freaking out and so forth, and, you know, your own people can do that, with some member of the public will do that too. They just hang around and don't go anywhere. They're easy to find. Did you ever release any large snakes? Ever? I've lost count. You put python anywhere half decent, it stays there. They don't go anywhere. That's why they're so good for the job. I mean, the only reason you go to this trouble is as part of a campaign. It's always a case when there's a bill in front of the legislature and it's part of a media campaign.
The residents here discovered this giant python, much to their obvious terror. People react to these tactics with the expected response. They cry out for protection from the dangerous animals, and laws pass which do not favor the public or the responsible private owner, and certainly not the animal itself, who has become a hapless victim of the animal rights conspiracy. Many exotic serpents are on the API's ban list. I wanted to understand more about the public safety issues regarding exotic snakes, so I traveled to Wilmington, North Carolina, to the Cape Fear Serpentarium to see if a large python or an exotic venomous snake could escape its owners and survive.
Well, the Serpentarium is a place where people can come to get educated about what reptiles are really like.
We have snakes from 39 countries. And does anybody remember how do the pythons kill their food? That's right, they grab it, they wrap around it, restrict it, they squeeze it so hard it can't breathe, they swallow it whole.
This is one of the reasons I don't recommend people get a pet Burmese python or reticulated python, because this is really what you're looking at here. This is their caging and housing needs. Right. They have their own pond with a waterfall, they have a tree to climb on and rocks to bask in, and they probably take about more space than the average child.
Scott McKenzie assured me that the only way a large python could be found under a house or in a suburban neighborhood was by being deliberately placed there. Even as an adult, it couldn't survive even one cold winter in North Carolina.
Could a python reach an adult size if it were loose here in North Carolina?
Yeah.
No, because none of its natural requirements would be met. It has very specific temperature requirements, very specific humidity requirements, a very intense diet. None of these things would be met here in North Carolina. It wouldn't even survive through the first winter.
Now this is glass here. This looks.
This is a very thick sheet of well-tempered glass, and certainly, you know, these are young adult crocodilians, and they are quite strong. They're capable of exerting over 2,000 pounds of pressure per square inch with their jaws. However, that's their jaws. They're certainly they can exert some force when they're motivated to do so, but I don't believe they could break this glass. Right. This was built to some extreme specifications just for these exhibits.
Hey guys, listen up. That's a good question.
I'm here.
How do we take care of them? Let's say you can figure it out. Where do you think the door is? Has anybody found the door to these cages? How do we get in there and clean the cage and feed the snake?
Right up there.
Up there? No, that's a good guess. Well, we have to get in there and water these plants and clean the whole cage. Where's the door? Everybody sees the door? That's right, you found it.
There are barriers. Yeah, we actually place. We have sturdy wood and metal mesh barriers that go up so that the public can't even approach the cages when they're open.
Thanks for coming to the Serpentarium. We're going to begin feeding some snakes now. We're now going to feed some of the deadliest venomous snakes on Earth, the Bushmasters. These snakes reach at a phenomenal length of 12 feet. It's a very big viper. It's the longest viper in the world. 12-foot Bushmaster is so long that even lying flat on the ground it can strike you right in the face. It can strike about 60% of their body length. The Bushmasters are, as I say, very, very venomous. In fact, 80% of the people bitten by this snake die. So we're
we're going to open these up now and show you how the Bushmaster feeds. This one's waking up. He's learned that this means food. When he hears that key in the lock, he knows food is coming. This is the black-headed Bushmaster from southeastern Costa Rica. It is a very rare snake. In fact, it's the rarest of all venomous snakes. It's almost extinct in the wild. And we have the only breeding colony in the world. We are also the only supplier of the venom from this species to make the all-important antivenom against the bite.
They are being maintained in venom labs in their native countries, but I don't think they're currently doing a very good job of reproducing them. They're just taking them out of the wild, and it's not really a sustainable resource when you're just taking animals out of the wild for venom and research. We actually have a very sustainable breeding population. They are happily reproducing for us. This is a very delicate species and very difficult to keep alive in captivity.
The breeding season comes a little later in the year, so it may very well be possible to provoke him into eating today. Whoa, here he comes. Here he comes. Whoa. Now he's plunged those fangs deep into the organs of this animal, and he's giving it everything he's got. More and more venom. Probably enough venom to kill everyone in this room.
Unfortunately, what the study committee has actually turned into is an animal rights activist party.
I've been a professional breeder of dangerously venomous snakes since about 1980. That's about 27 years. I've hunted them in 35 countries all over the earth. I'm still alive. Why?
So why is Dean Ripa still alive? Internationally recognized for his work with giant pit vipers, Dean has captured more different species of exotic snake from the wild than just about anybody alive. This discovery program shows him catching a rare and deadly black-headed Bushmaster in Central America in order to breed and save the species from extinction. He runs the largest reptile exhibit in the state, one called by Oxford American Magazine, our state magazine, and many others, as the finest reptile exhibit of its kind in the world. There's enough raw venom under its roof to kill about 10,000 people, provided it's injected in their veins, of course. For over 3 decades, Dean has been at close quarters with thousands of deadly reptiles. Now, if the contention of the Animal Rights Committee is right, surely Dean Ripa, if anybody, would have died a long time ago.
The point is, this is a profession. It can be learned just like any other profession. It can be taught. There are safe ways to do this. If people will use these safe ways, they won't get hurt. And they'll live a long time. I'm 50 years old, by the way. I've been doing this since I was a boy. And now here's an interesting statistic for you. In all the history of North Carolina, not one person has ever died from an envenomation by an exotic venomous snake. Don't you think it's strange that a law should come along that should say that I can't put these animals in a cage where they can't bite somebody? In other words, I must leave them running loose. A person comes up to me and says, please would you rescue me from this menace in my yard, and I'm supposed to not be able to catch it and take it away? This is the kind of logic used by animal self-righteousness, meaning no logic at all. Now, the justification usually used by the animal rights extremist when he wants to start banning the keeping of snakes like these is, what if they get out and hurt somebody? Well, I've got news for them. They are already out. There are at least as many venomous snakes running free in North Carolina as people. About 10 to 20 million dangerous venomous snakes running loose right now in North Carolina, and about 500 million in the continental United States. God put them there. I've simply locked a couple of them into an enclosure where they can't hurt anybody. In the spring and summer months, we get hundreds of calls from unhappy homeowners wanting to be rescued from the snakes they find in their backyards. We rush out and rescue the snake, usually from having its head chopped off. The animal rights extremists would prefer these animals were killed outright. They would also rather people got bit by the snakes, since they don't really care about human welfare.
Animal rights is a religion. It's a belief system that no humans should ever be able to interact with animals.
Something that Pam Folk from Carnivore Preservation Trust said wouldn't leave my thoughts.
tell you, I do not come with facts and figures. I came with stories. I do not come with facts and figures. I came with stories. I do not come with facts and figures. I came with stories. I do not come with facts.
Dean's calmer testimony at the Serpentarium confirmed what Pam had implicated, that animal rights extremists would exaggerate and alter the truth in order to get a hysterical public to pass their laws. So Dean, does the lack of factuality bother you in this case?
That's been the problem from the beginning. They don't have any facts, and they start telling each other a lot of stories. What we have is a small mob of storytellers, led around by one or two individuals, both of them animal rights extremists. I have published a 16-year study. There has not been one single record of an escaped tiger or lion ever killing anybody in the whole history of the United States. Thus far, every fatality involving an exotic big cat was what we call a cage accident, meaning somebody either went into the cage with the cat or was pulled into the cage with it.
Animal welfare is a legitimate concern for the welfare, comfort, health, and safety of animals. We are very much pro-animal welfare. And as far as I know, in the 100 years or so that zoos, circuses, and private individuals have been keeping and breeding big cats, there hasn't been a documented escape leading to death.
You're saying this isn't a problem?
If I said there was a problem, I would have to commit myself to an insane asylum. Only a very unbalanced person could think these animals pose a threat to human life in America. A doctor would conclude that such a person was dangerously paranoid.
One of the ways that these animal rights terrorists get their way is by misleading and misinforming the public. They use scare tactics to create fear and terror where it's really not justified by the actual facts or statistics. Facts and statistics are an animal rights activist's worst enemy. There have been quite a few deaths and injuries from domestic animals. Horses kill an awful lot of people. Dogs, there have been quite a few dog bites. Dog attacks killed 300 Americans from 1979 to 1998, and 800,000 Americans sought medical care for dog bites. There have been 14 deaths from dog attack in North Carolina since 1990.
So you're saying these people are suffering from some kind of mania?
I am saying that they have talked themselves into something that they factually know nothing about. For example, it is 96,000 times more dangerous driving to the committee meeting to ban big cats than the so-called danger of big cats themselves. The chance of being killed by a bee on the way to the committee meeting is 54 times higher. Of being killed by a deer in a roadway accident, it is 311 times higher than to be killed by a big cat. White-tailed deer, by the way, kill more people than all other animals combined in the USA. And consider this figure. With 29,000 suicides every year, it is 58,000 times more likely that the committee members will kill themselves than that they will be killed by a big cat. And with 18,000 assault deaths annually, murders, it is 28,000 times more likely that the committee members will murder each other before the next assembly meeting.
So, after all the hysteria about big cats, how many people do they actually kill? With all the car wrecks, dog attacks, natural and man-made disasters of every type, finally at the end of the day, how many deaths do big cats actually account for in the United States?
Only 48 human injuries occurred in all 50 U.S. states during the last 16 years. None of these were fatal. Of the fatal injuries, there were only 8 deaths in all. In other words, out of 2,500,000 deaths from external causes in the United States over 16 years, only 8 were caused by big cats. To phrase that differently, there are about 151,000 injury deaths every year, of which big cats account for 0.0003% of the total. With 15,000 captive tigers in the USA and 30,000 free-roaming cougars and a human population of almost 300 million people, big cats cannot manage to kill even one whole person in any given year.
Yes, there may not be a large number of cases where these animals have attacked, but the problem is when these large cats attack, it is very often fatal.
Well, now we know this is not true. Very often means 1 in 6 attacks, which really isn't very often at all. And in fact, the amount of deaths do not even rate animal keeping as a dangerous profession, quote unquote, as prescribed by standards set by insurance companies. In fact, many professions are more dangerous, as listed: construction workers, lumberjacks, commercial fishermen. Even pizza delivery men are in more danger than zookeepers. Professional zookeepers only suffer about 1 fatality per year. The bottom line is, the professionals who care for and keep these animals have made a choice to do what they do. They understand the risks, and they have safety protocols which protect themselves, the public, and the animals they keep very well.
Venomous snakes historically bite no one but their owners. There has never been, as far as I know, a death to an innocent bystander. Now, there have been a number of bites, injuries, including death, to keepers, people who are voluntarily going inside the enclosures or picking the animals up or working with them. And that's a risk that a keeper does accept.
There is a need to see these types of animals. Obviously, the Serpentarium wouldn't be open. We have innumerable people in here in school groups day after day coming to see these snakes. The Ashboro Zoo would like to stop that, or I should say Lorraine Smith and some of her cronies at the Ashboro Zoo would like to stop that, and they would like to stop everybody in this state who is any sort of competition to them. They want a clear playing field with themselves the only players.
Contact your senator, your House representative, your mayor, your Congress representatives, anyone who would have a voice in making these decisions for our legislature, because we, the people of North Carolina, should be the ones making the decisions for what laws impact us. We should not be legislated by animal rights activists from Sacramento, California.
The zoos can't hold everything. The last stronghold of wildlife on this planet is the private breeder. If we take that away, we sign the death warrant to extinction. It is a fact. Absolute fact.
In the end, she was lucky. Another facility did take that tiger.
And from us, what you've got is an incredibly beautiful cat who's relatively happy. She talks a lot, yes, but she's happy to have visitors.
And I truly believe that the work that we're doing is very, very important. Tia, all of the recommendations that Peggy got were euthanize this animal, kill the animal. Animal rights people are an issue for us because they would end all of the work we're doing. And we do conservation work as well. It turns out that we do have some lions whose DNA is being tested to see if they are Asiatic lions. Barbary Coast Lion Project is very interested. This is an animal that is extinct in the wild, is not represented in captivity. We don't want to lose these genes.
And you have a right to do the type of job that you know how to do, the professional type
Taking
of work
care of
that you
animals
do.
and showing animals to the public.
And that's what you've been doing all your life.
That's it.
Because you were raised up right here at this zoo.
That's it.
You know, I know you
And I
since you were
don't
a boy.
intend on being run out of business by a bunch of PETA people.
A bunch of people from Sacramento, California.
That's it. I just don't intend on letting them run me out of business.
Yeah.
Come volunteer here. Go to your local zoo, volunteer. Go to your local sanctuary and volunteer. If you do this, you will have the access eventually that you're seeking, and you will not end up in a situation like Peggy, who had an animal that she truly loves have to be rescued.
It is a conspiracy. It is a conspiracy between the animal rights activists from California and the zoo, which would very much like to have an economic monopoly in the state, and we cannot allow that.